So based on the information that we just copied down from the chart up here, we can now use that to take a standard form equation and be able to come up with the important pieces of information that are going to help us then be able to create a graph. So we're going to start with the axis of symmetry, which we know we find using this equation. So I know that my axis is going to be x equals the opposite of b, so that's my middle term. So I have the opposite of 4 over 2 times our a value. So 2 times 2. Well, I can evaluate that. Negative 4 divided by 4 means that I have an axis of symmetry of x equals negative 1. Now, as soon as I find that, I go ahead and draw that onto my graph. So I'm going to draw my dotted line so I know where my axis of symmetry is. Now, I've done that, so I know where the axis is, but I've also done the first piece that I now need to find the vertex. I found that, so that tells me that my x value of the vertex is negative 1. We need to find the other piece, which we can do by plugging that value into our equation and then solving. So we've got y equals 2 times negative 1 squared plus 4 times negative 1 minus 3. And you can go ahead and just plug that straight into your calculator. Just make sure if you're doing so, you're careful to put parentheses around that negative 1 to make sure that it's not going to get messed up sign-wise with the squared. Now when I plug that into my calculator, I find that I get negative 5, which means that my vertex is going to be at negative 1, negative 5. So I can go ahead and plot that next piece, actually draw that point onto my graph. So now the rest of these should be easy to be able to figure out. The y-intercept, I know I get straight from my graph, or from my equation when I'm looking at standard form. That's this third piece. So if I have a y-intercept, I know we've got it at negative 3. But I don't just want to write negative 3, because that's one of my biggest pet peeves, just writing a number. A number is not an intercept. You need a coordinate point to actually be telling me where this intercept is. So because it is a y-intercept, I know I have the point 0, negative 3. And if we want, we can go ahead and draw that on there as well. So at this point, I like to do my graph and then I'll come back to my domain and range, just because then I can actually see what the graph looks like. So at this point, I know that, well, I can reflect that point onto the other side. I've already got 3 of my points. Now the rest I can get thinking about my special point relationship. Well, I've already seen what happens when I move over 1, because I have those 2 points. So I can start by moving over 2. Well, normally I go up 4, but since I have an a value of 2, well, I know I'm multiplying, so I have to be going up 8 for each piece. So I'm going to go over 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and up 8 units. And then make sure I copy the same thing at the other side. Now I can keep going, but 5 points is usually enough for me to be able to see where my graph is going. So I'm going to connect my points so I can see this graph. And now that I have that, I'm able to answer these last 2 questions, domain and range. Domain is easy. We know our answer never changes. It's always going to be all real numbers. Now in terms of my range, I know I'm focusing in on this vertex and the fact that the y is negative 5. So my range, I've got all real numbers, but y has to be connected to negative 5. Looking at my graph, I see that all of my points are going to be bigger than negative 5. So we've got to have y greater than or equal to negative 5 for our range. So that's all the pieces I need here. I was able to create my graph from there. Now I'd like you to try the same thing for the next example. Try it on your own, and then go ahead and check your answer at the next step on Schoology.